Hi there and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to show you how to use smart objects in Photopea and why they're essential to a flexible workflow. So let's start here with this image. We've got 3 Einstein heads currently on the shot. One of them is just a background layer, just a flattened layer, and then I've got a cutout on the left and a quick cutout on the right, and this is just so I can demonstrate the differences. So let's just start off with no smart object. So what would happen if you were to, let's just say, make a cutout of a pixel layer like I've done here. And let's just say you wanted to shrink it in the overall composition. So let's make that small. Let's make it really small just to exaggerate the point. So you've shrank down your image, you've done a bit more work on the page, for example. If we look at that, obviously it's very pixelated because we zoomed in a lot in this document, and that's to be expected. But then further on down the line, you decide that you made a mistake making it too small. So we're just going to resize it back up to how it was, or closer to how it was. Maybe that's what we now want. So if I just do something like that, and you can see what's happened here. It looks awful compared to the original because we've scaled it down so small. The pixels have all been compressed down and then it's been flattened, so it's a destructive move. So then when we've tried to bring that image back up to its normal size, it's having to try and interpolate and calculate the pixels that would exist if it was made larger again, which just leads to this blurry mess, which is not acceptable for anyone. So that's a bad way of doing things. So we'll just get rid of that. But now I'm going to show you the smart object way. So on this right hand side cutout here, I'm going to right click on the layer and choose convert to smart objects. Now there are a few benefits of smart objects, and this is just the first one, which is pixel quality and resolution integrity. So let's repeat the last process, but with the smart object version. Make it absolutely tiny, and then later on we decide we want to make it larger again. We drag it up, and there we go. As you can see, it's retained all of the original pixel quality and resolution information from the main image. And again, that also counts if you do things like warping. If you did an extreme warp like that with a non-smart object and then you tried to warp it back after the fact, like if we then went to warp that, it would just be an absolute mess because it would have no more information to work on. But as you can see, if I edit the warp again, the smart objects got the warp live in the background, so I can go and readjust that as many times as I like without destroying the pixel quality. So you get the idea on that. From resizing, warping and otherwise distorting images, smart objects give you an excellent way to just retain the quality throughout, no matter what you put it through. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is live filters. I'm going to show you that now. So I'll go to the background layer, just the main shot, and I'll right click on that and change to convert to smart object. Okay, and by the way, you can tell it's a smart object because it's got that little square icon in the bottom left corner of the thumbnail in the layers. So now let's say, okay, we want to do something to this. Let's add a bit of blur. So we'll go to our good old Gaussian blur. And I'm just going to do these to demonstrate, so I'm going to push them to the extreme just so you can see what we've got here. So let's increase the blur to something like that. Now, as you can immediately see in the layers panel, we've now got some other options appeared underneath the background layer. We've got one that just says smart filters, and underneath that we've got the Gaussian blur. So because it's a smart object, we've applied the filter, the blur filter, but it's now retained it in this information here. So you can check the little eyeball icon on and off to turn on and off the blur or whatever filter you've chosen there. And we've got a layer mask here, but that's a layer mask for the effects and not for the actual pixel background layer itself. So what I mean by this is if we click on that layer mask, which is all white at the moment, so it's revealing. So white is reveal, black is conceal, if that's a good way to remember it. So now if you press Control or Command and I, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC, to invert that, now you'll see it's black, so the effect's basically hidden. But if we now press B for the brush tool and make sure our foreground colour is white, we can paint on that layer mask in white to start to reveal the effect, which in this case is a blur. So you can now selectively brush in whatever adjustments you've created on that smart object layer exactly where you want them, which can be really creative and fun depending on what you do, and the possibilities are endless with all the different filters and things you can apply in a Photopea. So that's just an example of that. I'm just going to undo that a few steps to get back to where we were. Okay, so we've got our blur. If you double click on that word Gaussian blur now, it will take you right back to the adjustments which are being captured live in the background, and in real time you can adjust them. So you're not stuck with what you first chose. You can go in this in real time, change it, you get the idea. So with smart objects, it's always editable. And then if you go to the little white cog icon to the side of that and double click, that will allow you to drop the opacity of the effect, which again could give you a different result than just reducing the strength in the actual blur. So that's the main premise of using filters in smart objects and how it converts them to smart filters, but we're not quite done with this one yet, because here's where it gets really fun. You can stack multiple filters and effects on top of each other and adjust them all independently. So for example, let me just increase this blur to make it super obvious for the next step. So if I now go up to filter, and let's say we wanted to add some grain to this image, and I'm going to do this to show you why the order of the layers matters. So let's add some noise. Just going to make it monochromatic. We're going to add quite a lot just to, again, to demonstrate the point. So now we've got, if you look, we've now got noise added above the Gaussian blur. So how the stacked filters work in a smart object is the very lower effect, the one at the very bottom, is actioned first, and then it goes up in that order. So it's not top to bottom, it's bottom to top. So the image is being blurred first, and now noise is being added over the top. We can swap these around by dragging them, clicking, dragging, and reorder them. So now if I put the blur above the noise, you'll see what happens. The noise kind of pretty much disappears just because the blur is now on top, so it's blurring all the noise. So it really does matter which order you put your effects in, and this is going to allow you to be super creative. But again, you could go into the noise, and because we've got everything live, we can really drop it back and hone in your particular effect. So that is a really good way of using stacked filters and effects to really be able to get creative with your images. Now there's one other main thing that I'm going to show you. You can right click and put clear smart filters to just get rid of any effects that you don't want. Now another benefit of a smart object is whatever you do to it in terms of, let me just make this canvas smaller, reveal the whole image. Whatever you do to it in processes of distorting, warping, or otherwise misshaping the document, and this is great for doing mock-ups if you've got artwork on the front of a box, for example, or a can, and you want to change it afterwards without having to do all the rewarping. So I'm just being silly here. I'm just, again, showing you an extreme example. I'm just making this all wibbly wobbly and bendy like a flag or something, and click OK. Now, if I wanted to change that image or do something to that image, if I now just double click on the smart object layer itself, you'll see that smart object now opens up into a separate layer temporarily, which is this. So this is the original image that's within the smart object. So now, if for example, you know, I don't know, we wanted to just do something a bit silly just to test it out. So bear in mind, this could be a label with some packaging. Yeah, let's give him some silly glasses, whatever. And some stupid hair. Okay, for the example, that'll do. So now if you save that, so Command or Control S, it's going to save and it's going to overwrite itself within the smart object. Now you can just close that window, and as you can see, that smart object in the main document now is immediately updated with the changes we've made. And even though it's just a silly bit of graffiti on it now, you can see how it's retained all the curve and all the displacements and things we've done. And this makes it really powerful. I mean, you could drag a completely different image into this if you want. So if we go back into it, I'm just going to drag just an image that I happen to have on the desktop of something completely different. Right, So we'll put this sort of vectorized guy in there. I'm going to save it again. And as you can see, this has now been retained in all of the original warps, distortions, and anything we did to the main image.